Hi there, my name is Liam Griffin and I'm a developer community manager here at Shopify. Today we're going to be looking at how to create theme settings by adding a custom social media icon to a theme's set of social icons, which you generally see in the footer of a store and that link out to a merchant's social channels. So even if you don't need to expand your client's set of social icons, this is still a great use case to demonstrate firstly how theme settings are configured on various theme files, and secondly how Liquid objects, tags and filters work together to render content that's generated or added by a merchant on the online store editor. So before we kick this tutorial off, I just want to show you an example of what this will look like as a finished result when we are working through this tutorial. And so basically we'll be creating a new setting that it will be accessible from the online store editor. That will allow you to add a new icon and a new link to the footer of your theme. In my case, I'll be working with a fictional gamer who has an active Twitch account, and they will be basically adding their URL into this field, and it will populate the theme with a logo and a link to their Twitch page. So this might not look like a huge customization, but it's a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about how Liquid works for rendering different types of content on the online store. And it's also a great addition if you're working with clients that might have accounts on the likes of TikTok or Twitch, or even for yourself if you have a portfolio store or portfolio site and you want to be able to link out to a GitHub account or to a Dribbble account, and you want to have the icons in the footer looking professional. So in this video, I'll be covering some of a process that was documented in a blog post earlier this year. That blog post will be linked in the description below, so you can follow along. There will be some changes, however, on that, as we'll be using a new updated version of Debut. So there'll be a few little nuances, and always good to keep in mind as well that depending on the theme that you're working on, there could be differences in terms of how this is set up. So this will be, I'll try to keep it as generic as possible and that you can follow along, but the process should work for any theme that you're working on. So let's dive into it. So the first thing we'll need is the icon itself in SVG file format. In my case, I'm going to be using a Twitch icon in SVG. I downloaded this off Font Awesome, and there's a lot of different websites online that you can search and look for SVG icons that you can use. And like I mentioned, it'll be in SVG file format. These are really great to use because they are very lightweight. They are very easy to scale across different devices. So no matter how a buyer is looking at the store, it should appear really well. So to keep this as simple and straightforward as possible, we're going to be looking at how social media icons are already implemented on our Debut theme, and then modeling that implementation, we'll be adding our own new custom icon based on how that's already set up. And that's generally a good practice to follow if you're adding something new, to take a look at how a theme is already set up and how you can fit the new addition to be as consistent with how previous features are set up. So we can see here within our snippets folder, this is where we have the icons for all of the different social media channels. So for example, icon -facebook.liquid is here. So this is telling me already this is where we're going to need to add in our SVG that we have gotten. Also to note here, I'll be using ThemeKit to edit my theme files locally in this text editor, VS Code. and I'll be able to watch for changes, and then automatically ThemeKit will push those changes up to my online store. So ThemeKit's really great to use. If you haven't used it yet, check out the video on our channel on how to set up a local theme development workflow. That'll show you everything on getting set up with ThemeKit if you want to use that workflow and follow along with how we're working here. So as we've noticed, our icons for social channels are inside our theme snippets directory. So we're going to need to take the SVG that we have downloaded, and we're going to need to add it to our theme. You can also see that SVGs, they are SVG elements within these snippet files, but they also have the .liquid file extension. So we're going to need to make that change to our new SVG2. And to make those changes, we can just open the SVG in VS Code. If we want to, we can make any changes inside here to things like class names. Essentially, this SVG file is just instructions telling how to render this file to be an image, but we want to add it to our theme. So we're just going to save as, and we're going to save it as a icon dash twitch .liquid. And we're going to save that in our theme folder, the project folder that I've been able to download using ThemeKit. And I'm going to add it to our snippets folder. So I'm just going to hit save there. And then we should be able to see that appearing inside our folder on our VS Code. But also, this should now be appearing, if I go back to my theme, we should be able to also see this appearing from the actual online store where it's hopefully been rendered. So if I just go in to check this very quickly, I can check the code from the admin just to make sure that this is working correctly. If I look at the snippets folder, we should see icon hyphen Twitch appearing, and yeah, this is what we're seeing. So we're happy with this. This is appearing. We've uploaded that new SVG to our store. So once we've confirmed that the icon is now in our theme, we can start working on creating that theme setting that will be able to render that icon on the footer when there is a URL that's been put into the online store editor. So the file that we're actually going to be looking at quite closely in our theme is called settings_schema.json. You can find that in the config folder, and the purpose of this settings_schema.json file is to be able to list all of the settings that are available for your theme and that are grouped into different categories. So you can see there's a category for colors, there's a category for typography and fonts, and it controls the organization and content of the menu that you would see on the online store editor. And since this is a JSON file too, you can see that the different settings are organized and grouped in JSON formatted arrays. So for example, with color, you can see that there's different arrays for the different properties that you can assign colors to. And also, as you notice, there are translations as well for the labels. We'll be looking a little bit into that when we're creating our own setting. And there's a lot of different attributes as well that are associated with this. And to show you an example of some of the settings that can be defined here, we can take a look back at our online store. If we go into the customize to go into the online store editor, we can take a look on the theme settings tab, and this shows us all of the different global settings that we're able to set. So for colors, we can change colors for headings and links, for the text in bodies on product pages, for example, or on these different sections. Typography if you want to change the different fonts, and it also shows some information on the theme you're using, the version number, who supports it, where you can get documentation, and all of this will correspond to what you see on that settings_schema.json file. So here you see the name of the theme, the developer's name, the version, all of this that we saw on the editor. And as well, all of those different settings like colors and fonts can all be defined here. So you can start to see a lot of the flexibility that's possible if you want to create very customized settings for your client. In our case, we will be looking at settings that are related to social media here. So to help us out, we can go into this area. We can look at the different headers. Social accounts is what we want to be looking for, because basically we're going to be adding a new field here with some new information. But we can use this heading as a guide to help us find where we need to actually make those changes. So if we go back to our settings on _schema.json file, we can look for where social accounts might be appearing as a header, and we can see here we found this header. It's the only one entry for social accounts, so this is telling us right off the bat that this is where we want to be looking for. And we can take a look at what are the existing settings here. So this is the social accounts header. There's no inputs associated with this. It's just displaying a header above the different settings. And here we can see as well that there are the links for Twitter. The labels are all the same because there's no translation available for that. But we can see here there's a type ID info. And this is where all of the different channels are appearing. So Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and we can see that those are all corresponding here. So we know this is where we want to start making changes. And when we are making those changes, the easiest and the most reliable way is to model our changes off how the pre-existing settings are already created. An example of that could be if we take our Facebook link setting and we basically duplicate it and sub in the relevant info for Twitch. So I can just copy and paste it in the second instance of this, where Facebook is visible. I'll change this to Twitch. And now once this is done, we can save. And if we go back to our settings, we should see, if we go back to our online store editor, we should see that this setting has been added. So great, yeah, we're seeing it appearing here. And if I just view this on mobile view, we can see that we have setting here for it. We can input a URL into the field, but we're not seeing any icon appearing because we haven't actually created that connection yet. And before we move on to creating that connection, I just want to quickly run through the different attributes that we added when we created this new setting, and just go through the different values and attributes here and explain each one of these individually. So the first attribute in this setting is type, and we define this to being text. So the type really is about the type or the kind of input setting that we are creating. In this case, it is a single text field, so it's called text. But there is also a lot of different types of inputs that you could use here. You could have an image picker, you could have drop downs, checkboxes. There's also more specialized theme setting options, such as font picker that you could add here, custom HTML too. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can create and add into your theme settings. Secondly, we can look at the ID attribute, and basically this creates a variable that we can reference on Liquid files that will create a connection between that Liquid file and our settings file. So if we add a URL in on the online store editor, that URL, that value will be associated with this ID that we've created. And finally, the label attribute and the info attribute, these are for display purposes mostly, but they basically allow you to apply a sort of a subheading or description if there's extra context needed. In our case, we are using this to show an example of a URL that you can use. And so this is what you're seeing, this sort of subheading and this example URL. This is what you are seeing appearing on the online store editor when we add in values for the label and the info attribute. Additionally, these settings that we create will be appearing on the online store editor in the order that match the order on the settings file. So just explain that a little bit more. If we have our Twitter and Facebook settings above Twitch in the settings file, this is what we'll see on the online store editor as well. So we're seeing here the Twitch setting is appearing below Facebook and Twitter. So this means if you're creating your own settings, if you want to reposition anything yourself, you're able to do that from within the settings file. So yeah, let's move over to the footer section now and get everything tied together and working. So the markup for our footer is it's actually contained within a sections file. So if we go to the sections directory and if we go to footer.liquid, we'll be able to see all of the markup that's used to generate and output content that you see on the footer of the store. And again, the best way to do this is to search for an existing social media link or icon on the footer.liquid page, see how that's implemented and use that as a model for implementing it yourself. So if you're working on a custom theme or an older theme, this might look a little bit different to you, but definitely take a look and see how it works on the theme before implementing exactly what I'm doing. So here I'm just going to look for Facebook. I'm going to see where it's referenced here and use that as a model for my Twitch icon and link. So here I can see it is referred in two places. One of these is in this if statement, or if within these if tags, control flow tags that Liquid use, and it's also, I can see it's used to create an assign, using an assign tag to create a variable called social icons. That's the first instance of where Facebook is mentioned. And I'm also seeing that there is another assign tag here, creating a variable called socials, which contains all of the different social media channels which are on our store. So this is telling me, I'm going to model the solution off of this approach of these two areas. So let's take a look at the first instance of this, where we have this control flow tags that's creating an assign if these statements are correct. And basically what this is saying is that when there is a link present that's been added through the online store editor, if this is not empty, then the social icons variable that's created with this assign tag, that this equals to true. So we want the same thing to happen for our Twitch setting. So we can simply copy the Facebook setting, and you'll notice that this settings.social_Facebook_link, this is actually the same as the setting that we created. So if we look at the ID, this will correspond to this settings dot and then the ID name, and this is how we can reference settings that we've created in Liquid files by using the ID, but prepended with this settings dot to access and be able to create a connection between the settings and this footer. So once I've added in the Twitch setting ID as an extra condition on this control flow tag, it'll work in the same way as all of the other social links, so that when a URL is added, social icons, this variable here will equal to true, which is exactly what we want. So that is saved, and now we can move on to looking at the second instance where these social channels are mentioned again in this assign tag. So what this assign tag is doing is that it is creating an array with all of these social media channel names, and using the split filter to create a list or an array of these names, which then are assigned this variable of socials. So what I want to do here is add in our Twitch channel that we've created, and then it will be included along with the other names of the social channels in that array. And what we're going to see as well happening is that this socials variable will then be used in a for loop that will be able to output all of the different links and icons that are added on the online store editor. So adding Twitch here should be all we need to do in order to display the icon that we've created and added to the store, for that to be displayed on the footer. But I just want to dive in a little bit into how this is actually being achieved. If we look down at the markup where our social channels are being generated, we can see here there is an if tag setting up conditions. So if we have social icons, if those are inputted through the online store editor, then it's going to execute this unordered list with line items of our different icons. And you can see here we have a for loop here that's going to be iterating over the different social links that are available and then outputting those individually. So you can see here we have the opening of the for loop is referencing that variable that we created, socials, but we also have two other assign tags here that are creating two more variables. So these two new variables are social link and icon link, and what these variables will end up outputting to depends on the social channel or the social media. If we take Twitch as an example, we can go through how this would output. So first off, we have the name of the social media. Then we are applying three filters. The first is prepend, so adding social underscore to the beginning of the name. Then append, which is adding underscore link to the end of the name. And then finally, the downcase filter ensures that everything is in lowercase. So if we take Twitch as an example, we're seeing that social underscore is added to the beginning and underscore link added to the end. So this would give us social underscore Twitch underscore link, which corresponds with the ID that we created on the settings file. And then if we look at the second variable, icon underscore link, again, we're using the prepend and downcase filters. We're not using append this time. And if we take Twitch as an example for what this variable could look like, it could look like having icon dash or icon hyphen added to the beginning. So it would be icon hyphen Twitch, which corresponds with our snippet image that we created, or the SVG, which is now a liquid file. So here we see this is corresponding exactly to how this assign tag is creating this variable. So then if we look at the markup and how this is creating a link, so we see here this link element has a class, and the href is this liquid object, a placeholder that is going to reference the social link variable that we just created along with settings. So what this will do is it will basically create a link between this target and our ID that we've created. And if there is a URL added on the online store editor, then it will populate this area here. So we'll see that a link to Twitch will appear here. And then associated with that link will be an image, and that's the icon underscore link, and that would correspond with the image that we've added as a snippet, and that's why we're seeing the include tag being used here to include that image. So the image becomes associated with this placeholder URL. If added, we will see that appearing on our online store editor. So let's test that out. So we're back on our online store editor. We've added this Twitch setting previously, and now we should be seeing that we can see here now that when we add in a URL, we're seeing this icon is appearing. If we open this in a new tab, it should be bringing us to that Twitch URL that we wanted to. So this is working exactly how we were hoping it would. We can see that it's fitting in alongside all of our other social media icons, and it's looking great. So yeah, we're really happy with that. So this might seem like a minor change to the appearance of the theme, but I think it gives a really great insight into how the different theme files work together, how the different settings can connect the different files, how variables work, as well as showing giving insight into how the different liquid elements can allow you to represent those dynamic content types on theme stores. And there's always new social channels spinning up that your merchants might be active on. So it's definitely useful to be aware of how to make changes to this area. So if you found this video helpful, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. We upload helpful videos every week to support you with your development work on Shopify. And remember to check out the links in the description below for more helpful resources. Thanks for watching.